I wish I could talk to the monsters, have a conversation with the monsters, ask them if they even know they're monsters. I wonder if they even know they're monsters.
I just wanna talk to you one time. I really don't want to, but I have to. Gotta ask you, did you really have to? My trust wasn't even that bad, and I would've put it past you. Now I don't trust shit, cause you wanna do that little dumb shit. Wonder if you went to sleep that night, probably felt bad, slept it off, woke up, ate something, right? I ain't eat nothing, way too disgusted, bitch. I was up crying, pain in my stomach, bitch. Was you just trying to help you or control me? Hope it helped you cause it broke me. I went to the pew to console me, but it didn't change, I can never be the old me. Feeling lonely and I ain't wanna hold me, cause I ain't wanna meet another you. Probably take a day or a year to get over for you, but for me, I don't think I'm getting through it. When I have kids, I'ma be so overprotective, play detective, cause I can live knowing what you did to me happened to them, not again. I hope you know I cry sometimes, I wonder if they give you strength. Don't know how you feel, but I feel like shit, for real. Really, I'ma slip my wrist, for real. Bet you ain't know I had nightmares, did you? But you probably don't care. Probably somewhere with a smile on your face, not knowing that I feel this way. Damn.
I wish I could talk to the monsters, have a conversation with the monsters, ask them if they even know they're monsters. I wonder if they even know they're monsters. And I'll cry one last time, but I won't let you hurt me anymore. Still alive, and I'll die before I let you hurt me anymore.
I can't erase it, I know what you're going through, trust me, I really do. But it can be worse if you let it be. This is your moment to see from a different view. I know it's a struggle, cause you would be happy if you could forget what they did to you. I know they invaded, but you still amazing. There's something that they couldn't steal from you. There's something nobody could take from you. No, it's not your fault, so quit blaming you. They knew it was wrong when they did it, but kept going with it. It's nothing you made them do. Keep hugging that pain, it'll strangle you. I know you can make it, I pray for you. Accepting what happened is brave of you. It's breath in your body, you made it through.
Ty walked away from Antifa, and he says that this show had something to do with it. Ty, welcome.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for getting in contact with us. We're going to go for about 20 minutes here in anticipation of a longer, full 1 hour show that you and I are going to do on audio. So let's get into it a little bit. You told me that you had a similar story, a similar childhood story to mine, not exactly the same, but that you had abusive parents. And as you know, I draw a connection between the child abuse that I experienced and how I was raised and my eventual joining up with hard left, woke, extreme politics. Do you see a connection between the way you were raised as a child and where you ended up politically joining Antifa?
Yes, but with a more nuanced perspective on it. So it wasn't my parents that were abusive, it was my father. And my mother and my father were together from age 3 onwards, but it was me who reinitiated contact with my father, who was supposed to be no contact with me until I was age 18. But I reached out to him on Facebook. So my abuse for me began at age 15, 16, after I had two really great parents who did their best, did everything, put everything into me despite the fact I was a troubled child. And then suddenly I'm being sent to the other side of the state and I'm living with somebody who I didn't realize at all was the monster that he was.
So let me ask for clarification. When you were a young child, are you saying that your actual father was not part of your life when you were a young child?
No, my mother divorced from him at age 3. We lived in Virginia at the time, and then she moved us to West Texas whenever I was 3 because he became psychotic and abusive, displaying a lot of the tendencies you tend to talk about on the show, drug and alcohol abuse. He had gotten in trouble in the military, locked up in the brig a couple of times. You know, the kind of guy who would go and throw his his officers' uniforms into the freaking river whenever they were going on missions. Just completely mentally unstable, violent, and she had a great escape and took me with her. And she married my adopted father, Joseph King, about a year later.
Okay.
And I didn't realize how good I had it.
So what ended up happening at 15?
I was a really troubled youth. We grew up in Odessa, Texas, which was really ghetto, really trash, a lot of violence, sex, drugs, just not a great environment to keep a kid. So my adopted father, he wanted to take us and move us to North Texas because he worked for the post office and he wanted better opportunity. So we went and did that, but I think I was already troubled. There was already a lot of Odessa that had tainted me, and I pushed my parents to the point where they just didn't know what to do with me. And I had secretly been communicating with my father for about half a year to a year before telling my parents. And I think about a year or two following that, maybe, that's when my mom had enough after we had a violent outburst in the house. And she was just like, you take him. Like, I don't know what to do anymore.
When you say violent outburst, who was doing the violence? Was it you or your mom or somebody else?
Me.
What did you do?
Often, getting in fights with family and friends. The night that we blew up, I had a neighbor girl that I got in a fight with, and she was trying to tell my little brother that I was smoking cigarettes, which I was, but I didn't want my little brother to see me in that light. So I started screaming at her and cussing her and treating her like shit. And stormed out the house yelling at her, and her parents were with my parents in the front yard, and I'm calling her a cunt and a whore and a bitch and fuck you and you deserve to die. And her family's just like, what the fuck is going on? And my mother called my father up at that point crying. It was just like, I don't know what to do.
Do you now that you look back on it, do you have any idea where that anger was coming from, or at least in part?
I think definitely not having, I had a father figure in the house to be sure, but not my biological father. But also from sixth grade onwards, I was dosed with all sorts of medication, Wellbutrin, Concerta, Abilify, everything you can possibly put in a kid. The school said, you need to get him doped up or he's going to be expelled. And I got put in a mental hospital for about 3 weeks in sixth grade as well. So I was just constantly on all sorts of medication. Sometimes it would feel like it would change every couple of weeks. Sometimes it felt like it would change every couple of days. But that's only because time there's so many blocks of my childhood that come back to me, because it's just like, I realized I spent most of my childhood high.
Okay.
The first time I ever started doing drugs, I was just like, holy shit, this is kind of familiar. So I think that played a large part in it.
That's a hell of a thing to have to realize, isn't it?
It's not fun.
The amount of drugs that they will put younger and younger children on now shocks me. I mean, I was a teenager when I was put on antidepressants, and that was, in those days considered quite young, but it was much earlier for you. Now let's talk about Antifa. When did you join Antifa?
I want to say 2019, 2020. So it was probably only a year, maybe 2 years at most. But there was also times that I was going into protest prior.
Okay. How old were you when you first joined up with them or started hanging around with them?
It's 2019. I would have been 22, 23.
Okay.
So I think I would have been 23 in 2020.
So I'm going to ask you, there's a couple parts to this question that's all related. What drew you to Antifa? And part of that is how were they able to seduce you? What did you think they were? And can you identify anything that made you particularly receptive or vulnerable to being conscripted by an extremist political group?
Absolutely. The thing that drew me to it was, to give you a couple answers on that. A, it was there. Being in Eugene, Oregon, you can just walk downtown and boom, you can be a part of things. The other side of that is growing up with the wars in the Middle East, with the Bush administration, with the Obama administration, watching all this military expansion, watching all these people die, watching all these bombs be dropped. You spend your entire life when you're born in 1997, and most of your perception is post 9/11, wondering, when the hell are people going to step in and do something about this? And I saw Antifa as that, because as much as the left wants to scream about conspiracy theorists and militancy and all this, most of that was on the right. On the left. Those were the ones who were talking about 9/11 and government corruption and big pharma and all of that. And I saw Antifa as being a direct way to get involved and to counter the police who were militarized by the Obama administration. I remember during the Obama era watching train after train after train of tanks and SUVs and weapons caches, and in some cases even coffins for some reason. And it was just like these were going to police stations all over the country. So I've been horrified since I was in high school. So I guess for me in that moment, with everything going on, all the crazy things in the world, it was just like, this is it. They're finally doing it. I have to be a part of this. Let's go get the president of the United States. Fuck Donald Trump.
Okay. All right. That's the whole package wrapped up for us. Thank you. Would you say that, because I see Antifa as an extremist political group, verging on a terror group in much of their actions, and I see this connection. I see so many people who join up with extremist politics. I didn't join Antifa, but I had my own version of joining up with groups like that, although they were not involved in violent protests. And I absolutely see a thread between my unstable and troubled childhood and finding meaning and purpose and belonging in the political set. Do you believe that happened for you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, one of the things that I think drew me to Antifa as far as the people that I think your show highlights so well is the trauma bonding. I want to come in and demystify what Antifa is. People want to think of it as just like a bunch of kids sitting around building pipe bombs. It's people with traumatic backgrounds. It's people who were touched by their daddies, who were beat, who were treated like absolute garbage. People who, when I'm sitting in a room with them, I can sit down and be like, same. I feel that. I understand that. And it creates an environment of just everybody kind of meshing together and living in their trauma.
Well, I agree, because I've had a very similar experience. If you're somebody like me, somebody like you, somebody like the people you often wake up or you take a notice one day. You look around at the people who are your friends, the people who show up at the meetings you go to, or part of the clubs you're part of. And you say, gosh, they're so similar. Everybody's got a tale of, my dad abandoned the family, or my mother was unstable and never held a job and freaked out on us kids, or I was bounced from foster home to institution to juvenile hall, or I was sexually abused, or I was physically abused, or I was mentally abused. And of course, birds of a feather flock together. We tend to find each other. People of similar backgrounds tend to self-select into groups with each other. And I think for me, what's so disturbing, I didn't realize it was disturbing when it was going on. I didn't know when I was in the middle of it that my vulnerabilities, my unresolved, I know these words sound kind of trite, but unresolved childhood trauma had really left me open to, I was very receptive to a group or a political ideology that said, we have the solution. We've identified the boogeyman. We've identified the villain. And if we all work together to overthrow this villain, then this bad, terrible world will all be taken care of. And I allowed myself to be led along by a number of Pied Pipers in extreme leftist politics that made that promise. Was there anything similar for you in relation to Antifa?
100%. There's a lot of people in Antifa that want to claim that their family members are white supremacists or their daddies are Nazis. Whenever I went to live with my father, this is how it was for us. Our house was a tattoo shop. We were the only tattoo shop in town in this small town in South Texas. So we're 24/7, people in and out. And I'm the assistant. I'm helping sweep up. I'm helping take care of things. There's instances where I have to keep an eye on a shotgun because we have some dangerous motherfuckers coming through, and it's just like, keep an eye on them. Like, it was a very crazy situation to jump from, a family that just put you in the suburbs to do well, and then all of a sudden you're around gangs and white supremacists and Mexican mafia and all this small town white trash, that you start to see the dark side and the underbelly of this. So my father was hanging around a lot of white supremacists and ex-white supremacists, and was a very, very racist and homophobic and rageful and violent and terrifying fucking individual. But in my head, I began to believe he was a white supremacist due to the proxy he was allowing himself to get as close as he was. There was a time where I walked in and he was doing a Hitler portrait, and not on somebody. I don't think he ever wound up tattooing it, but he was drawing it on a piece of paper. And I just remember being like, what the fuck are you doing? But I was so scared of it that he was just laughing at it. He's just like, look at this guy might get this, da-na-na-na-na. And I just kind of laughed with him, and I'm like, okay, yeah, no, that's freaking wild. Crazy someone would want that on their body. But rather than take the time to realize that maybe he was just making bad friends and bad connections, when you get into movements like Antifa and you have people in the government and people in these political organizations telling you about how everybody's a Nazi and how it gets into society and how prevalent it is. For someone like me, seeing how prevalent it was in my own personal circle, in my own personal life at that point, it made me feel like it was really everywhere. Like really and truly everywhere, until the more and more time went on, you realize that a lot of the stories people were coming up with weren't even remotely close to what I was dealing with at all. And it was disrespectful to even suggest.
Well, it sounds to me, from what you describe, it sounds to me that it would have been a reasonable conclusion for you to come to that your father did have white supremacist and racist sympathies. I mean, it certainly sounds like that. No?
Yeah, but it's to the extent of which you take it, because I should have gone to therapy and dealt with that. But rather than do that, it's just, it's...
Sounds like you're saying
it's a weird place to be in.
That you extrapolated this personal experience out and said, much more of the world is like this. It's not just my family. It's everybody out there. So I guess in a sense, it sounds like your joining up with Antifa was in some way a direct reaction to how you felt about your father.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was all about father issues.
Was he violent to you personally? What was he like? What was he like in the home as a father, as a family member?
So there was a summer or two I actually went to stay with him before moving with him, and it was great. He would take me to the game store. We go do movies, look, this is his old chain. He was a juggalo. He loved Star Wars. We loved all the same thing. Marvel, DC, superheroes, like Injustice, whenever that came out, we got it the first day. We would play it every day. Like, this dude was my best fucking friend. And then whenever he finally got his hands on me and I was in the home, I wasn't allowed to have friendships. I wasn't allowed to communicate with my mother. I had to tell all my old friends goodbye. Specifically was told, you are not allowed to communicate with them anymore. All of my communications in and out of the house were monitored. I was not allowed to leave. Everything that I said was listened into. And my father treated me like I was in jail. And he went to jail a couple times. I don't know if he suffered trauma from that. But one of his big moves was he would grab me and he'd pin me against the wall, put his arm against my neck, and he'd be in my face breathing, and I could see the nostrils and feel his breath, calling me boy and all this shit, and fucking just over simple things like questions. I was such a timid kid at that point because I didn't want to upset my father, this man that I had spent my entire life wanting to know. So if anything, I treated him better than anyone else I'd ever treated my entire life.
And it made no difference in how he treated you.
None.
It sounds very cluster B to me. And I mean, this is just a guess. I'm coming in from the outside. I only have a little bit to go on. But the man you're describing sounds like he exhibits traits of narcissism and sociopathy. What would you say?
100% in borderline psychopathy, too. This is a man that I still am scared of. I've forgiven, but I haven't forgotten. I recently tried to get back in touch with him sober less than a year ago, and it didn't go well. It ended in threats and him commenting on pictures of my minor sister and my mother, creeping up on all their social medias, talking to me about all the weapons he was purchasing. This is a man who, I feel bad to say it because, like Blair White, she talked with her therapist recently in a video, and she talks about how she told her father, essentially she wished that he would die or kill himself, and then it wound up happening. So I know there's a lot of weight to be said with what I said, with what I'm saying, but I will not truly feel safe until my father drops dead of cancer or whatever fucking takes him. And that's just the reality. I'm a 27-year-old who is still scared of his father, despite the fact I'm a country away, basically.
You're not alone. You're not alone. There are so many people who come from backgrounds like you did who feel that way. Yeah, it's common. We've only got a couple minutes more left. Of course, we're going to get into much more detail when we have a whole hour to talk with each other about this coming up, and I'll announce that when we're done today. But just briefly, where are you politically today? What have you changed your mind about?
A lot of things. In a way, I still want to say I'm classically liberal, but I really have skewed more conservative. If you'd asked me a couple months ago, I'd have said, no, I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. You ask me now, I'm like, yeah, I'm probably going to vote for Donald Trump, even though I really like Kennedy. For all the wishing Donald Trump death, for all the going after him, for all the protesting, it's like, all right, turns out that all the things we thought he did wrong, he didn't do wrong. He was right about a lot of things. There's an insurrection taking place in this country, and it's led by the far left and the communists, and all of our enemies want a piece of our ass now. Because
hi, I'm with you.
Our kids are stupid. Like,
I know.
He was right.
Are you still having that sort of revelatory moment where you say, I'm saying this? I'm saying this thing that I used to make fun of other people for and call them Nazis?
I would have want myself burned at the fucking stake for this.
I know. Your old self would kill your new self, right?
100%. Or sick my friends on me.
All right. Ty, we're going to wrap this up for today because we're going to go into much more detail later this week. And I want to tell all of you who are listening and watching the show, this is a great time for you to sign up to become a supporting member to Disaffected, because we're going to have supporting members are going to join us on our Discord this coming Thursday, April 11th at 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So again, Thursday, April 11th, 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We're going to be recording an audio-only hour-long show with Ty and have a fuller conversation. And then he's going to stick around afterwards and do some Q&A with the audience members, the Disaffected members. So if you want to get in on that, there's a couple of ways to do it. You can easiest way is just sign up at our Substack. Go to disaffectedpod.substack.com, become a paying subscriber there. You can also do it on subscribestar.com/disaffected. I put the same content up at each place. Ty King, I want to say thank you for joining us. This conversation has whet my appetite, and I think it probably has for the audience. And I look forward to having some fun with you and the rest of them this coming Thursday. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you after the break. I had done all this for her, and she was gunning for me. She started to call my colleagues and give plausible deniability. She'd say things like, I'm really concerned about Josh. I wonder if he might not be taking his medicine. This woman was trying to ruin my reputation with my work colleagues. And I saw these people doing the same thing, actually victimizing somebody and then having the temerity to pretend to be the victim themselves. And once I saw it over the trans question, I saw it in so many other areas of leftist political interest. Race and racism, relations between men and women, accusations of thoroughgoing misogyny lobbed at anyone but particularly men who questioned anything to do with the feminist agenda of the woman who was presenting it before him. All of this with reversals, and we're going to come back to this many, many times during this show. I'm going to talk about some of the terms of art that are used when talking about domestic abuse and family abuse, because they're synonymous with the tactics that are used by people who are engaging in cluster B personality disorder type behaviors. And one of them is the reversal. There's an acronym called DARVO: deny and attack and reverse victim and offender. DARVO. The person who aggresses says that he is the victim and then convinces other people that he's been victimized and he is actually making a victim out of somebody else who's done nothing to deserve it. So I saw all of these things happening, and I didn't want to see it. I mean, it was difficult enough to come to terms with the most difficult truth that I've had to deal with, and that truth was that my mother did not love me. She did not love her children because she's not capable of love. She is fundamentally broken. This is a very, very difficult thing to accept emotionally. It's possible, but it takes a while. I didn't think anything could get as bad as that, but when I started to see cluster B and abuse behaviors happening, not only frequently, but being embraced by the left, and in fact, having these abusive behaviors labeled as authenticity, right? My mind was spinning. And it caused me to take a really hard look at the political causes I was supporting and whether they were truly the causes I thought I was supporting. It's what I want you to be able to take away from the show as it goes along. I want you to know that if you recognize this behavior in your own life, that it has a name, it has a psychological description, there are professionals who understand it, there are people like me who understand it, there's help. There is life on the other side of it. But number two, and I want to sharpen your pattern detector. I want to help you see who these people are in your life. I want you to be able to make a reasonably informed judgment and to be able to discriminate between, as I said in the last episode, a friend who's going through a rough time and somebody who has a disturbed character and a pathological personality who's unlikely to change. Because personality disordered behaviors are human behaviors. I could read you the list of diagnostic traits underneath each of the 4 cluster B personality disorders, and each one of them by itself is something that most humans have experienced or engaged in at one time in their lives or another. These are human traits. What the difference between a normal range personality and somebody who may be personality disordered it's a matter of degree, right? How many of these traits do they have as compared to, say the average person? How severe are they? How often do they occur? Right? It's a matter of degree rather than a matter of categorical difference. And the fact that if somebody can be truly said to actually be diagnosed with a cluster B personality disorder, that's already severe. Okay? I used the term severe cluster B personality disorders in the last show, and I realized that might be a little bit misleading. There's no such thing as a mild cluster B personality disorder as compared to a normal person. Sure, there are people who may be on the milder end of the borderline range, on the milder end of the narcissistic range. And if you get even milder still than those people, then there are people who fall out of the personality disordered range. They may be very high in certain narcissistic traits, certain histrionic traits, borderline traits, but it's not quite severe enough that you can say that their personality is disordered. But any of us can have fears of abandonment. Any of us can have a very weak ego that under stress convinces us that other people are plotting against us when it isn't true. All of these behaviors are human behaviors. But once you cross the line into full personality disorder pathology, it is already severe. And one of the ways that some people that I would describe as having borderline or histrionic traits with a big dose of narcissism end up getting their distorted emotional needs met is that they camouflage themselves. This is something that you can find in a lot of personality disordered people. Some of them are very good at covering up. They have a really good false front, a mask. You'll often hear people talk about the narcissist mask, the false self. Well, there's a mask and a false self, well, to all of us, right? All of us have a certain persona that we try to present publicly that's different from the one that we
present privately. We may behave differently on social media than we do almost all of us do. I have a very wise friend who says, she says two things that I cannot get them out of my head because they're such good rules of thumb. Number one, that social media itself, all of it, not just Facebook and Twitter, but all of it, has the potential to push normal people into cluster B behaviors where you'd never seen in any other context. And I've seen that for sure. And I know it's happened to me. I have been absolutely at my worst when I was a heavy social media addict and didn't know how to ration myself. This can happen to anybody. The other thing she says is that for many people, alcohol itself is a personality disorder in a bottle. And that's also true. If anybody has experience with problem drinking, it's probably going to make sense to you.